Donald Trump got caught red-handed with the peace plan. It turned out that the peace plan presented by Steve Witkoff was originally written in Russian and then translated into English for the White House. And there is already evidence that it was actually Russians who wrote this peace plan for Donald Trump. And this could mean that Trump is now presenting a document that doesn't belong to the American side. It's just a list of the Kremlin's wishes. And this is even more shocking because at the same time Trump is threatening to stop aid to Ukraine if Zelensky doesn't accept capitulation. At the same time, the Washington Post writes today that, according to sources from Kyiv and Washington, bringing the United States peace plan to a format acceptable for Ukraine will require months of painstaking negotiations. As the Washington Post writes, even if President Zelensky wanted to sign it, he wouldn't be able to, because there is no political basis for it. After all, there are many points there that are simply legally unacceptable from the very beginning. That's why there are already assessments that an agreement between the United States, Ukraine, Russia, and Europe, and that's exactly what it will be signed in the best case in a year. My name is Alexei Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, write a detailed comment under this episode, and also subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pichi News. The link is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. In addition, if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details in the description. So The Guardian has clearly pointed out that the United States peace plan project for Ukraine consists of 28 points. It was probably originally written in Russian since its English version contains awkward constructions. This suggests that most likely this is not the result of joint work between Steve Witkoff and Kirill Dmitriev. Rather, it is the work of Russians, which the Kremlin handed over to Trump, and now the United States president is presenting it as his own peace plan. By the way, don't be surprised, the Gaza Strip peace plan wasn't written in the United States either. This plan was prepared by Qatar and Egypt and then handed over to the White House. And Trump's representative Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner. They toured the Middle East, promoting this peace plan as an American initiative. But let's get back to the inconsistencies in Donald Trump's peace plan. We are talking, in particular, about the third point of the plan, which states, "It is expected." And in the English version it says, "Is it expected that Russia will not invade neighboring countries and that NATO will not expand further?" And right here it immediately became obvious that it wasn't written by Americans because of "it is expected." For the English language, this is an awkward passive construction. From a grammatical point of view, the phrase "it is expected," meaning passively expected, is more logical and doesn't look strange in the Russian version. But in English, such a passive form is generally not used. Among other Russianisms that apparently made their way into the text are the word "neodnoznačnosti," which is written in English in the document as "ambiguous," and the word "zakrepit," which is written in English in the document as "to enshrine." Such constructions are not used in English, and that's why these features raise questions about the authorship of this text. And this is where the White House exposed itself. Earlier, the White House said the draft plan was created by United States President's Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Russian State Representative Kirill Dmitriev. It was reported that they wrote the text together during a meeting in Miami. Ukraine and its European allies were excluded from drafting the plan, but now it's obvious that the basis of the peace plan was most likely written by Dmitriev or some other Russian and then just run through a translator. Or maybe it's just due to ignorance that these particular features of authorship are used in the wording. Journalist Luke Harding, who identified these translation errors, spent a long time working in Russia. In 2011, he became the first foreign journalist to be expelled from the country after the Cold War, supposedly for violating accreditation rules. Before that, Harding had spent several months publishing a series of articles in The Guardian based on WikiLeaks materials, including about alleged connections between representatives of the Russian authorities, oligarchs, and organized crime. Following an international campaign for Harding, Russian authorities granted him a new visa. But I would like to note that this phrase with the word ambiguities really looks very awkward in English, and not just because of the word ambiguities. That's not all. The full phrase is, all ambiguities of the last 30 years will be considered settled. Ambiguities in this context, well, first of all, is hardly appropriate. Besides, in the original English text, it would more likely say should be considered, meaning must be considered, not will be considered, meaning will be regarded as such. So, perhaps in Russian, this sentence was a quote, all contradictions of the last 30 years will be considered resolved. But once again, in English, no one uses will be considered, meaning will be. They use should be, not will be. In general, as you understand, yes, this is quite a strange translation and such nuances don't really explain much. Let me briefly remind you that Trump's peace deal involves, among other things, handing over Crimea and Donbass to Moscow's control and reducing the size of the Ukrainian armed forces to 600,000 people. Ukraine's refusal to join NATO and a ban on the deployment of foreign peacekeepers on Ukrainian territory, as well as Ukraine's non-nuclear status, and for Russia. And in this plan, it is proposed to gradually lift all sanctions, restore the G8 format, and grant amnesty for all war crimes. Ukraine also waives all reparations. And now Trump is demanding that Zelensky quickly sign this deal by next Thursday, but that's unrealistic. The Washington Post writes today that bringing the United States peace plan to a format acceptable for Ukraine will require months of painstaking negotiations. Here's a quote. Even if President Volodymyr Zelensky wanted to sign it, he couldn't because there is no political basis for it, a source told the publication, emphasizing that there are many points that are initially unacceptable. He compared what is happening to the preparation of a mineral resources deal between Washington and Kyiv, reminding that it was revised for 3 months before being signed. But the current agreement is being prepared between the United States, Ukraine, Russia, and Europe. So I think its discussion will take about 12 months. This is the beginning of the peace process, not its completion, the source noted. Another official told the Washington Post, what? Zelensky, at a meeting with the American delegation led by United States Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, asked to make changes to the plan, and the general's team agreed to some adjustments. But which ones exactly is not specified. It seems that the United States split their teams between Driscoll and Witkoff to play good cop and bad cop. One puts pressure, while the other tries to say, let's work together on the changes, the official noted. Meanwhile, a Bloomberg source reports that Zelensky, together with the leaders of France, Germany, and other European countries, is trying to rewrite the United States peace plan before the November 27 deadline and present it as a constructive update. The leaders are trying to buy time for Ukraine so that it can develop new terms for a ceasefire with Russia. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has also started making contradictory statements. And now, a source close to the Kremlin told The Guardian that Putin liked the general outline of the proposal. At the same time, Putin was dissatisfied that among the 28 points there was no mention of a legally binding guarantee of NATO's non-expansion to the east, as well as the inclusion of Ukraine's neutral status in its constitution. As for Ukraine's accession to the European Union, Russia will only agree to this if the military component is excluded, the source added, citing the Austrian model of neutrality as an example. That's why experts say this is only the beginning. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinion and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.